Hey everybody, I hope you guys are all doing okay. Welcome back to Majesty, the Fantasy Kingdom sim, for what is going to be our farewell to the Kingdom of Cosmopolis. So we spent 4 long sessions building up what I defined as the perfect kingdom. And now we're going to spend some time just basking in the glory of what we've constructed. Initially I was going to do a longer video, like more in depth, like talking about all the different hero types, but I think I'm going to just do a shorter one. I'll talk more about that in a few moments. First of all, let's just load up the game. Now, before I get into anything else, quick thing that I want to talk about, something that just occurred to me as I was starting things up just now. It's that what you see before you is a pretty good representation of the kinds of things I like to do on my channel. So they won't all be games exactly like this, although I do plan on doing more games with a similar concept, right? Like games with a kind of sandbox mode where you can just build your own perfect thing. A few games I've got planned to do like that, but even beyond that, even with the other games that I've played or will plan to play in the future, I work with them in a similar way, which is that I like to, while staying vanilla, that is without cheating, without modifying too many of the game mechanics, while staying true to the initial constraints, I like to see how far I can push things. And typically that's going to be in the form of completionist objectives or other challenges that I impose on myself just to make things more interesting. Now, if that sounds like the kind of thing that you think you might be interested in, then it might not be a bad idea to subscribe. Though, of course, that is all entirely up to you. Now, with that said, it's time to get into what I wanted to talk about for this video. Initially, I had this thing planned where I'm gonna talk about all the different hero types, but I've kind of scrapped that idea for a couple of reasons. Number one, I just think it would end up taking too long, and also I've talked about most of them, and even if I haven't talked about them, you will have seen them in action during the long, 6.5 hours or so of gameplay sessions while we were building this kingdom. And I think a better idea would be to just take a step back and talk about this project as a whole. What it means to me, why I did it, why I enjoyed it so much, and why I think you might enjoy doing something like this on your own. So, building things in a good and effective way is satisfying no matter what kind of game it is. If you've built your base well in a real-time strategy game like Age of Empires, that has a certain amount of satisfaction to it. But I believe that it's extra satisfying in a game like this because of the fact that you don't control things directly, right? All these guys are just going about on their own accord and doing their stuff, and if you've set your kingdom up well, meaning if it's robust enough to withstand enemy attacks, then you get to a point where you can just watch things happen and not even do anything. And this is, in a way, it almost seems paradoxical, because you think that the whole point of playing video games is to be doing stuff. But what I'm saying is that one of the greatest joys in this game is to just watch things happen and not do stuff. It sounds weird, but I'm 100% serious. Like, this is some of the most profound joy that I've experienced in a video game, like, ever. Certainly this year, the most satisfying, relaxing thing that I've done is this project right here. One thing I should mention, a lot of game time has gone by in between the last gameplay session and this session. The main reason that I was telling myself that so much game time has gone by is because I was like, oh, I need to make sure that things actually are going to be relatively calm, right? That I can take down the dragon layers when they pop up, and that these different parts of the map are well defended, and if there's anything else I need to build. And yes, I did use that time to make some modifications. For the most part, it was just, I built an extra guardhouse here, extra guardhouse here, extra guardhouse here, but you'll know it doesn't take 100 or however many in-game days passed to build 3 guardhouses. The main reason so much time passed is just because I was mesmerized watching the action on the screen. And it is hard to describe how good it is, like, without I'm struggling for words here, but I think you probably get what I'm trying to say, is that it's something that you need to do yourself before you experience the true emotion that I'm talking about here. And to that end, I'm gonna leave off, well, I'm not ready to end off the video just yet, but I will offer some tips. Like, if you guys want to play this game, but you're worried that it'll be a bit difficult, maybe you watched my first few sessions against the dragons and you're like, oh, this is really tough, but nonetheless you want to do something similar yourself, I will mention that you don't have to do it the way that I did, right? Like, you don't have to fight against dragons. You, in fact, can start up a sandbox-esque game that is closer to being a true sandbox, where your enemies are literally just rats. You can play a game against the weakest enemies in the game. You can still do everything that I just did. Your marketplaces will generate revenue for you. You can build trading posts to get even more money. And you may be worried that your enemies aren't going to be strong enough opponents for your heroes to give them experience, and that's true, but then you can always use the fairgrounds to level up your heroes, if that's something you want. So you can do something like this on a map where there aren't, you know, severe difficulty considerations. Like this thing of fighting dragons, that's just an extra thing I placed on myself. All of this is to say that this game is very accessible, and I highly, highly recommend it. And if you're the kind of person who gets satisfaction from just building things up, like gradually building things up, watching things grow, and then just watching the bustling community life in what you've created, I think this game is one of the best, if not the best, ways to scratch that itch. One final thing that I will say on this topic before I start wrapping things up is that if anybody is interested, I am even willing to upload my save file for this kingdom. So even though I strongly believe that it's more satisfying if you do it yourself, like even with that idea in mind, I do also recognize that it does take time, it's a lot of work, and if all you want to do is you want something like this, where you can just zone out and look at it for a while, I am fully prepared to share my save files. So if anyone is interested, I will be more than willing to upload it somewhere on some... I'm just looking at these yellow dots. I really don't want my fountain to get destroyed, but yeah. To wrap up that thought, yes, I am willing to share my save file if anyone is interested. Just let me know and I'll set something up. I'll do it eventually anyway, but if anyone is interested, I would, expedite that process. All right. Now it's time to start. It's time to start the slow and painful process of saying goodbye. And one thing I'm gonna do periodically is I'm gonna be checking the mausoleum just to make sure none of my heroes are dead. And I'll also be opening my embassies because on at least one occasion one of my heroes glitched and stopped existing. So if I open an embassy and if it says all guilds full, that's telling me that all of my heroes are still on the map. And that's an important thing, right? It would be an awful note to leave off if one of my heroes had vanished. But they are all still here, so we are still good on that objective. So what we're gonna do is we are just gonna say hello to all of them. I'm not gonna talk in depth about them like I was planning to. We are just gonna go to each of their guilds and I'm just gonna say one brief sentence about, or a couple brief sentences about each hero. Starting with the Priestesses of Crypta, because they are the only reason we were able to do this. With the skeletons that they summoned, the vampires they charmed, we would not have been able to fight dragons without them. So thank you, Priestesses of Crypta. Next, we're gonna say goodbye to the healers at Agrella who tirelessly, were always there whenever there was fighting going on, offering their healing to those who needed it. So thank you, healers of Agrella. To our monks, despite all the frustration they caused me by never getting into combat, I want to say thank you, because you made things kind of fun. In fact, in that in-between session, in between the last gameplay session and the session right now, like one of the funniest moments, I'm kind of sad I didn't catch it on camera, was I had a monk right about here and he got into combat with a troll. And I was like, I want this monk to keep fighting this troll so he can gain some levels. So what I started doing was I started healing the troll. And I healed the troll a few times. And I think it was the third time when I just realized the absurdity of what I'm doing. Like just how low have I sunk trying to level these gosh darn guys up. So despite all that frustration, you did at least give me some colorful moments like that to reflect back on. So thank you, monks. Thank you, elves. You guys are another mixed bag in terms of what you've brought. You helped us economically, but then you also brought in gambling and whatever goes on in the lounge, and that, you know what, probably the less said about that the better, but beyond that, you were pretty cool. You were going around performing in inns and just generally being okay dudes. So thank you, elves. Let's also say goodbye to our rogues. I mean, listen, anybody who's brazen enough to steal from a marketplace while a palace guard is walking right by. Like, you've just got to admire that audacity, right? You guys love money more than anything else, but at least you love something. At least there's something in life that you find valuable. So for that, I think you've earned my grudging respect. So thank you, rogues. Next, we're gonna talk about the Rangers and the Barbarians. You guys are men of the wilderness, and the Rangers were crucial exploring the map for us earlier on. The Barbarians came later on. They haven't gained as many levels, but you know, they're still nice to have. And one thing I will say about the Barbarians is they have some of my favorite names, like randomly generated names for each hero based on like a pool. I think like there's a first half and a last half of the name that gets randomly stitched together, but occasionally you wind up with gems like this: Groud of Big Trees, or Rame the Large. But my favorite by far is Fargo of No Town. And yes, I am a big fan of Fargo, both the movie and the TV show, though I haven't actually been to Fargo myself. It's something I should probably do. Let's say goodbye to our lovely warriors, who, I mean, you guys were just pretty crucial. Once you gained a few levels, you were hard to take down. And you were the main reason why our rangers and our priestesses and our rogues were able to rain ranged attacks down on our enemies without being under threat themselves. So for that, thank you, warriors. Our wizards. Man, nobody in this entire game does as much damage as you guys. So even if you mostly die from a single hit, despite all that, you've done some really good work for us. So for that reason, thank you, wizards. Let me just take a brief detour to take these lairs down as well. Next, we move along to our Solarises. You guys were pretty important. You're garrisoning our guardhouses, shoring up our defenses. Kind of, you're the saving grace. You're the only reason this horrible mistake I made by building stuff all the way out here hasn't completely been, you know, smashed into dust by monsters. Is because you guys were walking out here and garrisoning these guardhouses, fighting those vampires, fighting those trolls. So for that, thank you, Solarises, or Solari. I've still never figured out what the proper plural term for that is. And speaking of the Solari, let's also say hello and goodbye to our adepts. You guys also are really handy for our kingdom defense because you're running around between buildings. In fact, you guys are probably the only reason this fountain is still standing, because this fountain is right next to this sewer entrance, which would easily be destroyed by the first rat man that pops up, except for the fact that the patrolling adepts are gonna take him down before that happens. So for that, thank you, adepts. Let me just quickly deal with these layers as well. And we're almost done. We've just got 4 hero types left. Next, we're going to talk about, or we're going to quickly drop in and say hi to our dwarves and our gnomes. You guys are well, dwarves, you guys were an important barrier protecting us from dragon attacks. Once we built this outpost, they were all coming towards this, and the fact that your outpost is still standing is largely due to just how tough these dwarves are. So for that, thank you dwarves, even though you're running away right now. But we also pay a huge debt, or we owe a huge debt to our gnome friends. Because, again, of this horrible mistake I've made building stuff all the way out here, means every time it got damaged, our peasants would have to walk large distances, meaning they often would not be where they were needed when things got damaged here. But because our gnome friends were always running around, and because they're willing to repair things for free, just out of the goodness of their own hearts, that's one reason why our settlement is maintained just as well as it is right now. And for that, thank you, gnomes. Lastly, but not leastly, we have our paladins and our warriors of discord. Now, what I could have done was, I've got 2 warriors guilds. I could have built one entirely for warriors of discord, one entirely for paladins, but I didn't do that. I split you guys up because this right here, and this is the perfect note to close on, I think this right here encapsulates the spirit of Cosmopolis right here, these 2 warriors guilds. We've got the champions of chaos, the warriors of discord, and the champions of order, the paladins, not just fighting but living side by side. They share the same quarters, and I think that is just a beautiful symbol of unity. And I think there's a lesson that the rest of us can learn from the fact that they've been able to put aside their differences and work together for a common cause. And for that, I thank you, paladins and warriors of discord. With that, we have gone around and said our final goodbyes to all of our heroes. And I know I'm dragging things on a lot just because it's difficult to say goodbye, but I do think now it is time to bring things to a close. So I thank you for watching. If you are only just watching this final episode because you wanted to see how the final thing looked, and this is the only part of it you watched, then I thank you for that. If you watched the entire series, those long 4 sessions where we slowly build all of this up, then I thank you for that as well. And if you're watching this now and you're curious to see how I built this, you can of course see those sessions I just mentioned in the playlist that should be in the video description. But even if that's not for you, if this is all that you've watched, I thank you all the same. I hope you had a good time, and I hope to see you in my next project. So until then, take care.